Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this time I'm going to be giving you a full tank review on the Tier 8 French Premium Heavy Tank, the FCM 50T. While the FCM 50T has been around in World of Tanks for quite a while, it truly has stood the test of time. That's probably down to the fact that this is one of the fastest heavy tanks in the game, which likes to outmaneuver its opponents and use this 90mm main armament to quickly pick them apart. The FCM 50T is a mid to long range sniper that has the mobility to keep its enemies at that distance. And as the vehicle has preferential matchmaking, you never have to see tier 10 tanks. I'm going to quickly run down the statistics of this vehicle to get you all up to speed if you don't know about it, and then give multiple helpings of Ace Tanker gameplay. The FCM 50T can be found in the tech tree with a similar cost to the other tier 8 heavy tanks. The exact price is 11,900 gold, so take that into account if you're thinking of picking one of these vehicles up. It has a standard amount of hit points, 1,500, which enables it to take quite a few hits before it goes down. And it's not a slight vehicle. When it's fully equipped, it weighs over 55 tons, which pretty much means that you are going to be favorable in a ram-off with other medium tanks and light tanks. And some other heavies, for example the IS-3, which weighs just over 50 tons, you're going to probably come off better than it if you catch it in the side or the rear. But just because this vehicle is labelled as a heavy tank doesn't mean that you should go ham into some E75s. Now on to one of the highlights of this vehicle, and that is the 1000 horsepower engine, which gives this tank a whopping 18 horsepower to ton specific power ratio. And things just get better when you also factor in that the tank's top speed limit is 51 kilometers an hour, with a healthy traverse speed of 40 degrees a second, so this thing is very nimble. As I said, one of the fastest heavy tanks in the game. But unfortunately, this mobility does come at a cost, and that is the armor of the vehicle. It is 120 on the front of the turret and the hull, 80 on the side, and 80 on the back of the hull, and 60 on the back of the turret. Now unfortunately, while 120mm of armor at the front of the tank does sound like a lot, look at the angling, it's very shallow. And so that means front on with this vehicle, you only have 145mm of effective armor. And even if you exaggerate the frontal angle of the tank, it barely goes up to 180. So for all intents and purposes, you need to consider that equal and higher tiered vehicles will be able to penetrate you very reliably on this gigantic profile front plate. Your main strength will be to use the 8 degrees of gun depression with this turret. As we can see, it does have a mantlet with 120mm of spaced armor, giving this effective armor in some places of 250 to 300. But directly around the gun shield, there is no armor behind this 120mm of spaced protection, so if you are engaging in FCM 50T, this is one of the easiest places to penetrate the tank, almost directly at the gun. Now the top of the turret on this tank is very thin, it's 40mm, but as we can see, it's very well angled, so unless your enemies are above you, this is likely to be an instant ricochet. But it's far more likely they're going to be aiming at the cupola of this tank, which is 80mm thick, quite prominent, and does pose this tank a few issues if it's stationary when hull down. Even if you angle the armor of this tank as effectively as you can to exaggerate the front, up to 170mm, that does give you side armor weaknesses of between 150 at the front and then 180 at the back. The tracks of this tank do count as 30mm of spaced armor, however, so if you're engaging tier 6, tier 7 and some tier 8 tanks, by angling the vehicle like this and just hoping that they slam on into your tracks, it's going to give you the highest chance of avoiding damage. Now on to the armament of this tank. It gets a 90mm with the second lowest alpha damage on any tier 8 heavy tank, with only the Carnarvon's 20-pounder having lower at 230. However, thankfully the FCM 50T doesn't have that bad of a rate of fire. It fires 8 rounds a minute, which is comparable to many tier 8 medium tanks. It also gets excellent penetration considering this is a vehicle with preferential matchmaking, 212. With its standard rounds that are very economical, costing 255 a shot. That's roughly 4 times cheaper than the 122mm guns that you get in the IS-6 and the IS-12 as an example. Let's not forget that your penetration is 37mm better, so you're not going to be bouncing that many shots even with the standard ammunition in this vehicle. The tank also gets rather nice gun handling. It's got .36 accuracy, which is okay, but the aim time is decent at 2.3 seconds. And when you're engaging very heavily armored tanks, especially tier 9 vehicles, then there is APCR ammunition available to you, which has got 259mm of penetration, but the rounds are very expensive considering the alpha damage is only 240, and this is a fast way to eliminate that profit that you're likely going to be playing this tank for. This tank gets 36 degrees a second turret traverse speed, which is not a disaster, but I should also make a passing mention that the turret ring on this vehicle is susceptible to damage as it is very prominent. And now on to one of the highlights of this tank, that it gets an excellent view range of 400 meters. And so that means with a decent crew and a premium consumable, or alternatively switching out the vents for coated optics, this tank can play a very effective scouting role. And this is something that you should never underestimate when we consider that tanks like the KV-5 get 350 meters view range, the IS-6 gets 350, and even the slightly better 112 gets 380. So I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's get stuck right into some gameplay. And so here we go, we are in quite a nice matchup. Roughly a third of the enemy team are top tier, mid tier and bottom tier, but we have to be afraid because they've got quite a few sneaky light tanks, and tier 7 light tanks, if they manage to get your flank of the FCM 50T, can make short work of that rather large and 80mm thick armor. Now I'm going to be taking the FCM 50T into the position that you see up here. Why would I be wanting to go up there? Well, remember the FCM 50T has the opportunity to play like a medium tank from a supporting role. I'll be able to use my 400 meters of view range to sneak spots across here, as well as get some shots across the map. And I've got the speed to be able to get there before people shoot me in the side from opposite. There's a Type 64 trying to race into position, but the good gun handling of the 90mm of the FCM 50T enables us to quickly finish him off before he can dig in there and cause us some trouble. So these bushes should keep me hidden. I don't want to get shot. The frontal armor on this tank, as I highlighted, is not super effective. It's about 180 to 190mm of effective armor, even if you're angling it at an extreme nature and they're aiming up at you. So what am I worried about on the enemy team? Well, they've got a couple of tank destroyers who we still haven't spotted. There could be a T-28 HTC and a Jackson in that location. And remember that I've got about 450 meters view range in this tank, so I'm going to be getting some good spots all the way up until probably this location here. Obviously, 450 meters probably won't counteract good camo rating on some of the light tanks, so they might be sneaking around here. But generally, if there's a larger heavy tank or a T-28 HTC that tries to go that way, I should be able to spot him. So we put a good hit there into a KV-13 who's trying to dominate that center ridge. And we pull back before we take any hits from who knows where. I just realized, luckily in this match, that there are no artillery on the enemy team. Artillery is something that you have to be very afraid of in the FCM 50T with its large profile and its mediocre armor. We don't know whether we hit that Jackson there. He disappeared just before the shell would have got to him on our screens. But just get a feeling for the gun handling of this tank. It's so different to have a 90mm compared to, for example, the 107mm that this KV-5 that we're about to shoot has. You can just come round the corner and put in a shot a lot more accurately than you could in most other heavy tanks. Although at that kind of distance, it'd be quite hard for us to miss, even with some of the more derpy 122mm. I think we just got shot in the side of the turret there. Yes, we did. One of the most frustrating aspects of this tank is the very large side profile, both when you're along like here, and also when you're turning your turret to the side. It really is a gigantic shoot me here part of the vehicle with 80mm of effect. Well, 80mm of flat armor. You're not going to be bouncing anything at all at this tier that could be shooting you. So a T-34, a Tier 8 American heavy tank, another premium vehicle, is trying to push his way along that southern corner. However, from this position, we are able to get some shots down into him. And hopefully our 212mm of penetration will be enough for his armor. Now he's a one-shot. I just want to load an APCR round to get him out the game quickly, because where I am right now is quite vulnerable. Luckily, our second one flies true straight into the armor. That .36 accuracy of the FCM 50T showing itself even at quite long-range engagements. Putting one out of two into that position. And oh my god, I just got reversed side-scraped by a KV-5. Great job there, buddy. Hiding that droid on the front of his tank, trying to keep his radio operator in the game, perhaps. We probably took his radio operator out with the first shot that we put into him. This KV-13 is harassing me in the middle of the map, and the enemies are ahead by a tank at the moment, and this isn't looking too good. They got two heavy tanks, tier 8 heavy tanks that are pushing their way through. Luckily, however, it's only the mid-bar of the KV-5's rear armor that is very, very strong, and if you shoot above it or below it, then it doesn't matter if he's got his tank angled at 45 degrees. When you've got 212 or 259 millimeters of penetration with the premium rounds, you aren't going to be bouncing. So I'm just going to continue to harass from this location, try and put view range out for my team so I can spot little buggers like this 1357 from getting around the battlefield. We aim quite well there. We put in a shot to him on the move, not the easiest thing to do. And I come around the corner and put one into the IS-3. Now he's going to out-trade me if he hits me here, but I feel like considering the IS is advancing through the north, I really wanted to kill him and secure that flank so that then I can go and hide behind the wreck of my fallen comrade. The IS misses, which means that we get the easiest of shot into his side, and I know that I've got a better rate of fire than him, so I'm trying to harass the second shot. But the Cromwell makes a terrible mistake coming around the corner, and I hit him, reducing him to 1 health. Well, that is sod's law. 1 health Cromwell. Should probably be loading a high explosive round for him here. But he doesn't seem to be too keen on looking after his tank. So we find ourselves towards this end of the game with a 5 versus 5 situation. Now there is a T-20 HTC somewhere around here, and there he is. Don't want to get caught by him. And luckily, our observation device manages to absorb a shot from that 122mm gun on the IS. Now that 1375 and the KV-4 are locked down in combat, maybe I can help out this Tiger. We put in 1 shot before we proceed to flank around. Use the mobility of the FCM 50T. While we could probably out-trade a T-20 HTC in the front, why would we bother when we can simply outmaneuver him and then make him absolutely useless in this situation? I turn my turret towards the ELC AMX for just a moment, because you always want to keep your frontal armor towards the enemy, especially in the FCM 50T with that very large side profile. And then I turn my attention again to the T-20 HTC to finish him off before I rush after this French Tier 5 light tank to hopefully be able to finish him off. Now I kind of mess up my ram here, only lightly grazing him and leaving him alive. My team punished me by TKing me a little bit there. But nothing too disastrous from the Firefly. He was probably just trying to save me from the ELC AMX. So our 7th kill of the game, and now this round is looking rather much more tidy. Can we find that 8th kill? Can we find the Radley Walters? That 1375 just ripped apart that T-20. We put a good one into his side, and the IS finishes him off with a nice roll of 387. Grrr, would have kind of wanted my Radley there, but there's still a chance. Can we get this KV-4? I'm loading some APCR rounds now with 259mm of penetration that should be able to challenge the KV-4 pretty much from every angle. Got to be a little bit careful here, though. Well, I thought we had to be careful because our IS-3 was on low health, and the Firefly on my team was low health as well. But the IS-3 manages to find the side of his turret and finish him off. Good job. So a nice all-round solo performance here for the FCM 50T. Hopefully this gave you an idea of the mobility of this tank as well as the gun handling. And when you can combine these two things and know the weaknesses of your enemy's armor, you can quickly outplay them and pick them apart. Let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats before we get stuck into some more gameplay. So this was an ace tanker in the FCM 50T, and we also got a high caliber and a Top Gun medal. We did fire a few APCR rounds this game, however we made a very cool 65,000 profit, which is always nice in a game that lasts less than 8 minutes. 1,423 base experience points. It should be noted that the FCM 50T does get a little bit of a bonus for being a premium vehicle. So if you're looking to train up your AMX 50B crew or maybe your 5100 crew, then the FCM 50T is a great choice. Our armor helped us out a little bit this game, especially when we absorbed the shot from that IS. But really, the only position that an FCM 50T is going to be reliably absorbing damage is when it's hull down and using its gun depression. And even then, your turret is maybe a 50-50 whether the enemy are going to go through it or not. So now I'm going to show you why I've been enjoying the FCM 50T more and more recently. While the tank it's great solo and you can play a lovely supporting role on the battlefield, I've been enjoying this thing in platoons so much. Big shout out to you, Philippopulos. Thank you so much for joining me in this game and everything you do for the channel, buddy. Yeah, FCM 50Ts, I feel, synergize really well in a platoon. You've got the mobility to get to where you need to on the battlefield to have that impact that you want to have in a platoon, as well as enough armor, unlike, for example, the AMX CDC, to simply brush aside lower tiered opponents and not have that kind of attrition that you will suffer in the CDC that you don't really want to have in a platoon together. And when you combine that with this 90mm that allows you to distribute your damage quite effectively, especially towards tracking your opponents and locking them in place, while your buddy sneaks in another shot as an example, it just feels like it's a very strong platoon tank. When you think about it, 240 alpha damage on this 90mm can be a bit underwhelming when you trade with other vehicles. However, when you know that you've got a platoon mate backing you up, that 240 alpha damage just stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. And as we're going to see in this replay, it can catch up very quickly on the enemy team. So we've raced into what I feel is a pivotal location on this map. And we put our first couple of shots into the FCM 50T on the enemy team. Not very much chance of these 212mm shells bouncing. Unless, as we just saw, it does. So he hit the outside of my turret. As we highlighted in the garage, that's about 120mm. Really, to be able to use the turret armor, you've got to hope that they kind of hit this area on the mantlet where it's 120mm, with 120mm behind that as well. Or against lower tiered vehicles. So I'm pulling back here because there are 3 artillery on the enemy team, and when you're in a tank with a gigantic profile, you really don't want to be around to get hit by S51s. That's a quick way to be out of the game altogether. So I suggest to Phil in just a second, look buddy, we're not having the impact in this game that we need to. How can we get in it more? And this Panther 2 that's below us that you can see, who's got himself into a very aggressive position, seems to be a little bit stuck. So I think during the live stream I suggested, Phil, let's do this, buddy. We got this. And Phil is straight in there after this Panther 2. He connects the first shot. The Panther puts one into Phil. I put one into the Panther 2. And this is where 2 tanks certainly are just better than one. That poor Panther 2. He managed to sneak in a couple of shots, but we took away 1,000 of his hit points. And from here on, we can use our mobility to hopefully get behind that Black Prince, who's stuck in combat with a Cromwell Berlin. We've got to be mindful, however, that the artillery don't hit us, and so by getting into this position as well, we should be safe from the artillery. We track the Black Prince with our first shot and then angle our tracks in, and as I was talking about in my latest STA2 video, this is really where you want to get a Black Prince. When you side scrape like this, you've got easy shots into him and he doesn't have easy shots into you. Oh, unfortunately, my shell goes a little low there and we don't manage to penetrate the FCM 50T. But my second shot flies true and we put a good one into his tracks, locking him in place for us to take him out. I angle the armor of my tank. Let me just pause you to show you how I'm angling the armor of this tank against him. That's probably the most effective that you could make it. Really, from that position, he wants to just shoot me on my front plate. And wow, that was a close one. Had a bit of a Neo moment there. T-34-85 very nearly got me. But you want to basically angle your side armor and your front armor because neither is very strong individually. So we managed to take out the FCM 50T, this T-54 Mod 1 also working with us as well. And now we can progress on. We lost a bit of health, but I feel like we out-traded our opponents. Our damage total now over 1,600. My tank down to about half of its hit points, taking 750 damage roughly. So Phil is advancing. Phil takes a shot in the side. He uses his repair kit to quickly get out of position. Because those T-34-85s on the enemy team could very easily rip him apart if they managed to get his side armor. Now I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to go straight after these Tier 6 Soviet medium tanks. And really, it's just a case of this guy not really knowing where he's going. And there's another T-34-85. Oh no, disaster! We fire right over his tank. That was a bit of a misplay there. The 8 degrees of gun depression in the FCM 50T are great, but not when you drive over undulations like a donkey, as I did there. But this game is far from safe. We can see that our artillery are making the right plays now, which is to run away from the base. You better run, SPGs. We can see there the GW Tiger Pig and the M12 also running away. And why is that? Because there's a KV-5 who just died approaching the base, so they don't have to worry about the KV-5 now. But there's also still an IS-6 who has got 3 kills on the enemy team. It's like a fairly respectable player. We're going to have to watch out for him. And an AMX M445 that are approaching our base. We can't let them cap. They've still got 2 Tier 8 defenders. And one thing that I'd like to highlight is that if we were in slower heavy tanks, we would have just had to try and bundle our way into the enemy base, risking taking big shots from the artillery, the ISU-152, and being caught by the T-69. But because we are in FCM 50Ts, with that great mobility, we have the option to get back to base and defend. For all we knew, the IS-6 and the AMX would have started capping, and then we would be gone within 50 seconds. But this IS-6 was very healthy before we started shooting him, and unfortunately I missed that shot going in. But I angled my armor, and just as I was saying in the armor review of this tank, if they shoot your tracks, that 30mm of spaced armor, hopefully in conjunction with the well-angled 80mm of side armor, can get you out of a lot of trouble. Now the AMX manages to break my gun, and I panic there a little bit and miss my shot completely. But thankfully, Phil is on the case. This is where you know that you've got good buddies. Phil gets straight in there, and watch this. The AMX has no interest in shooting Phil. He just wants to shoot me. He's not even shooting Phil. Phil gets to shoot him twice. You can see the AMX panicking there, turning his gun to the left or the right, unable to find the shot into me. And it's the right play for him to try and kill me. The only chance that he had was to take the low health FCM 50T out of the game. Before then he might hope for some kind of miracle to engage Phil or some support from his artillery. And so you saw that even the strongest players on the enemy team with 3 kills already and most of their hit points intact, FCM 50Ts working in a platoon together can quickly outwork them. And your armor still has a chance against the 175mm of penetration. And a big shout out to our artillery, who were not stupid, decided to leave the base and then were able to give us that kind of support that we needed to be able to take him out as effectively as possible. Also, the mobility of the FCM 50T does give you excellent cleanup potential. When it gets to this stage of the game where I feel like, yeah, it's pretty secure, what you want to do is just to get around, get that extra damage, get that extra experience. That's probably why you're playing your premium tanks, because you want credits and you want crew experience. And there's nothing more frustrating than being in a very slow, lumbering tank that's unable to do so. But then again, we actually have to be a little bit careful here. There's a full health T-69 on the enemy team and an ISU-152 who's still on half health. Those are some dangerous tanks, and the ISU-152 just took out 2 of our players, evening this game right up. But luckily, me and Phil are in position, ready to deal some pain to this T-69. Phil bounces one of the shells from the T-69. We put a couple of good shots in, and we're just locking him down here. And a fire is just rubbing salt in the wounds. We quickly did 620 damage to him. Phil roughly the same, ripping apart that Tier 8 American medium tank autoloader with some rapid-fire French 90mm. So, now we're up to 3,500 damage in this game. Great results so far. The ISU 152 misses, which should give us a chance to approach. Our armor might be good, but it's not ISU 152 BL-10 good. That is a scary gun. That Tier 8 Soviet tank destroyer can do 750 with a single shot. As that T-54 Mod 1 just found out. But what that really means for us is that we've got a nice window of opportunity to easily finish him off without having to worry about that gargantuan gun that he has. So in the end, it was probably a bloody good thing that me and Phil played so tight here, as we're the only tanks left alive on our team with the support of a self-propelled gun. And we certainly had a great game here. 7 kills between us and a Brothers in Arms medal. I feel like every game that me and Phil play, we just get better and better at playing together. And this battle certainly highlighted the strengths of the FCM 50T. We were able to race into positions that only medium tanks can dream of, get a couple of free shots in, and then fall back before we start to risk the wrath of the artillery. Next, we decided to seize control of the game, and combining our forces, we tag-teamed this Panther, who just stood no chance against our mobility and a combination of 90mm guns. After this, we fought our way through the valley, outflanked a Black Prince, and used that 90mm to get some effective tracking shots into this FCM 50T who was above us. And that's one of the best things about having that 8 rounds a minute rate of fire, that when you get your opponents tracked, you can keep them tracked. From there on, we used more of the mobility of the FCM 50T to race back to base, and got on a magical mystical tour all the way around the edge of the map, with time to spare to casually finish things off. So let's just take a quick look at the post-game stats before we draw some conclusions of the FCM 50T, and directly compare it to one of the competitors of this tank, the AMX CDC. So we nailed 6,309 experience for our triple ace tanker, got a lovely Brothers in Arms medal, and a high caliber for our 3,579 damage done, 402 base experience points, and our armor pretty much did the same kind of thing as it did in the previous replay when you take a look at it. And that's kind of the performance that you get with the FCM 50T unless you go hull down on ridge lines. And even when you do go hull down on ridge lines, your turret doesn't always stand up, as we saw when the enemy FCM 50T put one into our cheeks. This time we didn't fire as many premium rounds, however, and so we made 92,000 credits profit, which is always a welcome reward. So now let's compare the FCM 50T to the Tier 8 French premium medium tank, the AMX Chasseur de Chars. So the CDC has a slightly better rate of fire, and the same wonderful ammo capacity, which I haven't actually mentioned yet about the FCM 50T. It can carry a lot of rounds, which is a huge weakness on one of my other favorite Tier 8 premium tanks, the T-54 first prototype. Unfortunately for the FCM 50T, however, the AMX CDC has slightly better aim time of 2.2 rather than 2.3. And yes, I realize this says 2.21, but that's adjusted for some reason, and I really wish Tanks GG didn't do that. The accuracy of the CDC is also slightly better at 0.34 rather than 0.36. And one of the biggest advantages of the AMX CDC is that it gets 10 degrees of gun depression rather than the 8 that the FCM 50T gets. The CDC is also 6 kilometers an hour faster and gets 200 more horsepower on the engine, which when you consider that the vehicle weighs 20 tons less, gives it a huge power to weight advantage. But this is balanced out by the ground resistances, which are just butchered on the CDC, obviously to keep this ridiculous 35.5 power to weight ratio, the specific power of the tank, in check. So the turret traverse on the CDC is slightly better, but this is where the CDC obviously just falls apart completely. It has no armor, and even high explosive rounds can manage to get through it, and it has slightly less view range. And the biggest difference between the tanks that won't be shown here is the fact that the AMX CDC can meet Tier 10 vehicles, which the FCM 50T has never got to worry about. And so if I only had to recommend one, I would probably say that the AMX CDC is better for an advanced player who just doesn't need to have that mediocre armor that the FCM 50T has, who is also more comfortable with dealing with Tier 10 vehicles. However, the FCM 50T is probably going to be the better choice for maybe 70 to 80% of you out there that like to have those couple of comforts. One thing you should take into account of, though, if you're making this decision, is that the FCM 50T costs basically 50% more than the AMX CDC. And so if you're just choosing one or the other, then I think this will impact fairly heavily into the equation. But we must also consider that the AMX CDC will be training up your AMX 30B or your Batchat crew, while the FCM 50T will be training up your AMX 50B or probably your 5100 crew. All in all, I think the FCM 50T is certainly one of the best Tier 8 premium tanks still available in the game. And if used correctly as a supporting heavy role, it's going to do very, very well for you. Just don't go and take this thing brawling against other vehicles such as the IS-6, otherwise you're likely to get a one-way ticket back to the garage. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if you'd like to see more information about the AMX CDC, the Tier 8 French Premium Medium Tank, then simply click up here or use the more info icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the FCM 50T, especially if you're a very experienced driver in it. Do you agree with me that this is probably one of the most fun platoon tanks that you can play? Or maybe you bought it and absolutely hated it. If so, let me know why. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.